I was standing right in the middle of the ballroom, trapped in this extravagant dress and a mask that was way too glittery for my taste. Everywhere I looked, people were staring, and I could feel the constant clicking of the paparazzi cameras at the back of the room. Even though all eyes were on me, I could just sense how fake everyone was. This was supposed to be my sweet 16th birthday, but looking around, I realized I didn't know a single soul. The guests were just a bunch of strangers in expensive suits and gowns. It made me so frustrated, and I knew exactly who to blame. That total slimeball Gregory. I glared across the room at him. He was holding my mother's hand and acting all cheesy while he greeted the guests like he owned the place. Honestly, this whole ridiculous party was his idea. Oh, I should probably introduce myself. I'm Vivian, but my friends call me Viv. My mom is Jacqueline Mars, who happens to be one of the richest people on the planet. Because of that, I grew up thinking that living in a massive mansion with gigantic pools and having an entire floor just for my toys was totally normal. At least I thought that was how everyone lived until I turned 10 years old. That day, I was playing in my life-size dollhouse out in the backyard, feeling like a little princess in my own world. Suddenly, I heard muffled voices coming from the other side of the tall fence. I was so curious that I climbed up to peek over, and what I saw stopped me cold. There was a woman and a little girl who looked about my age, but they looked so different from anyone I'd ever seen. Their clothes were torn and dirty. Their hair was a tangled mess, and they weren't even wearing shoes. Each of them was holding a small piece of bread that looked green and moldy. Being so young and naive, I didn't understand what I was seeing. I called out to them, asking why they were dressed so funny. The mother stopped and looked up at me, her face tightening as if I'd slapped her, and she asked me to repeat what I'd said. I didn't realize I was being rude, so I just pointed at their feet and told them it was so silly that they didn't even have shoes on. That's when the little girl snapped. She looked at me with so much anger in her eyes and threw her piece of bread right at me. She yelled that I was the silly one and dared me to try the bread, saying I'd probably never tasted anything like it. She then called me a spoiled rich kid and told me that people like me always look down on others, even though we're actually useless to society. I just stood there, completely dumbfounded, as our security guards rushed over to shoo them away. I felt a knot in my stomach because I never meant to offend her. I was just a curious kid who didn't know any better. I ran inside as fast as I could to find my mom, hoping she could explain why those people were so angry and why they looked like that. But my mom didn't really give me the answers I needed. She just pulled me into a hug and told me that not everyone can be as wealthy as we are. She said I shouldn't worry about a thing because I was her sweet pea, and then she told me to go back to playing so she could get back to work. Even now, those words still haunt me. Instead of feeling lucky, I started to resent all the money and the big house. I just wanted to be a normal kid who didn't make people feel small. That's why, when I finally reached middle school, I fought until I convinced my mom to let me transfer to a public school. I even made her hire someone to wipe my entire existence off the internet so that no one would ever find out about my family or how much money we had. I started taking the bus to school every morning, and I actually loved it. I began buying my clothes from local thrift shops, picking out things that were comfortable and lived in, and I even started making my own lunches. I much preferred a simple sandwich I made myself over the fancy gourmet dishes the private chefs tried to pack for me. For a while it worked. I was living a perfectly normal life. But then Gregory, my mom's so-called boyfriend, showed up and ruined everything. I can't even think about him without rolling my eye. The man sticks his big nose into every single part of my life. Because of his constant whispering in her ear, my mom started nagging me about everything. She would complain about my casual clothes, saying I should be in designer label, and she started calling my public school trashy. He even convinced her that I needed to stop hanging out with what he called mediocre kids. Honestly, he was driving me absolutely insane. To make matters even worse, he was the one who planted the idea in my mom's head to throw me a massive 16th birthday party. My mom knows I hate being the center of attention, but it seems like whatever Gregory wants, Gregory gets. I can still hear him rambling on in that annoying, self-important voice about how this was a golden opportunity to introduce me to society and help me gain new associates for when I take over the family business. What a joke. The only thing that man actually cares about is himself and expanding his own network of business partners. I knew I couldn't get out of it entirely, so I finally agreed to a masquerade ball, but only on one condition. I told my mom she had to promise to stop interfering in my social life and let me choose my own friends without any more complaint. And that brings us right back to the present moment. Just as I was standing there feeling miserable, the host announced that it was time for my first dance. I was totally caught off guard. Me what? I hadn't agreed to any dance. I turned to glare at Gregory, and sure enough, there he was, applauding loudly and motioning for me to get out onto the floor. I felt so lost and was looking around the room for anyone I might actually know when suddenly a hand clamped onto my arm. Before I could even react, this middle-aged man I'd never seen before forced me close to him. He wrapped his arms around my waist and told me that the birthday girl had to dance with him. I started struggling, trying to push him away while my skin crawled. He was such a creep, and I was honestly panicking, wondering if anyone was going to help me. Right then, a boy who looked to be about my age stepped in. He was wearing a full mask and his hair was perfectly styled, but what really struck me were his eyes. They were the most beautiful shade of gray I'd ever seen. The masked stranger looked at the creep and told him to back off, saying he believed I had already agreed to have my first dance with him instead. I could have hugged him right then. As he led me onto the floor, we started to dance, and I found myself staring dreamily into those gorgeous gray eyes of his. Everything else in the room, the fake guests, the cameras, even Gregory, just seemed to fade away. It felt like we were the only two people there. When the music finally stopped, I gave a small curtsy and he bowed back to me with such grace. We were just about to walk off the dance floor together when he leaned in. I felt his warm breath against my ear as he whispered for me to wait right there because he'd be right back. Then, just as quickly as he'd appeared, he disappeared into the crowd. I stood there with a dreamy sigh, thinking about how crazy it was that a fake party like this actually led me to my perfect guy. But just as I was lost in that thought, I heard a sharp snapping sound right behind my head. Before I could even react, the string of my mask gave way, and it fell straight to the floor, leaving my face completely exposed. I realized with a jolt of fear that one of the paparazzi had intentionally cut the string. Within seconds, they swarmed around me like a pack of hungry wolves. The air was filled with the frantic sound of shutters and the blinding popping of flashbulbs. It felt like 1,000 tiny needles of light were hitting my eye. I desperately tried to cover my face with my hands, but it was no use. They were everywhere, capturing every second of my panic. Luckily, Mom saw what was happening and rushed over, pulling me behind her to shield me from the lens. She grabbed a microphone and announced to the whole room that the party was over. She thanked everyone for coming, but made it clear they had to leave immediately. While the security guards started forcing the crowd toward the exits, Mom led me quickly back to the safety of my room, away from the prying eyes and the noise. Walking through the school halls the next day felt like a nightmare. Everywhere I went, I could feel eyes burning into my back and hear the muffled sounds of kids whisper. It was official, my ordinary life was gone. My face had been plastered all over the internet as the daughter of the billionaire Jacqueline Marr. Now, everyone was looking at me like I was some kind of alien instead of just their classmate. It was so frustrating because inside, I was still the same old Viv. I spotted my two best friends at their lockers and felt a wave of relief. I rushed over to them, calling their names, thinking they would be the ones to have my back. But as soon as I got close, they just went ballistic. They started yelling about how I clearly didn't trust them enough to tell them the truth about my background. They told me right then and there that we weren't friends anymore, and just walked away, leaving me standing there alone. My eyes filled with tears because it felt so unfair. I never asked to be born into money, and I certainly didn't ask for that paparazzi to ruin everything. I wiped my face and tried to pull myself together, acting like I was fine as I opened my locker to get my book. That's when I noticed a small piece of paper lying right on top of my stack of notebooks. The note said it was the guy from my birthday party. He wrote that he was so sorry for what happened to me and told me to text him anytime if I needed someone to talk to. He even left his phone number at the bottom. My heart actually skipped a beat. So he went to my school? I felt so touched that just when everyone else was turning their backs on me, he showed up again. He didn't sign his name though, so I figured he was still playing his mysterious game. I decided right then to just call him my masked knight. From that day on, we started texting nonstop. We'd message each other during class, at recess, and all through lunch. It felt like he just got me. He understood the mess with my family, the drama with my former friends, and everything else. He was so sweet too. One day, I found a Blackpink concert ticket tucked into my bag. He remembered me mentioning I was a diehard fan. Another time, when I was having a particularly rough day, he sent me a gift card for Ben & Jerry's just to cheer me up. It was honestly the sweetest thing. I was sitting in Ben & Jerry's, enjoying a big scoop of ice cream. It tasted delicious, but honestly, I couldn't stop wishing my masked knight was there sitting across from me. I kept playing back that dance in my head, trying to piece together a face from those beautiful gray eyes and that gorgeous black hair. Just as I was lost in my daydream, my phone buzzed with a notification. Beak of the devil. It was a text from him telling me that he had a big surprise for me this Valentine's Day. He said he hoped I was as excited to see him as he was to see me, and he even added a little wink emoji. My heart nearly jumped out of my chest. Finally, I was going to meet the boy I was crazy about. I could hardly wait. When Valentine's Day actually arrived, I spent my entire English class staring out the window, completely unable to focus on the lesson. I was sitting in the front row, but my mind was miles away, wondering what he would look like without the mask. Suddenly, the bell rang, and a guy barged into the classroom carrying a bunch of flowers. He announced loudly that he had brought Valentine's roses for the ladies, and then he walked straight over to me. He handed me a candy rose with a small card tucked into the wrapper. I grabbed it excitedly, my hands shaking a little. I just knew this had to be from him. I quickly tore open the card and read the message wishing me a happy Valentine's Day. It told me to have a taste of the rose and then come meet him at the school pool. I didn't waste a second. I unwrapped the candy, popped it into my mouth, and rushed out of the room to finally meet my dream man. I rushed to the school pool, my heart thumping with excitement. But when I got there, the area was empty. I looked around, wondering where he could be. I tried to call out for him, but suddenly the whole room started to spin. My vision went blurry, and I felt a wave of nausea hit me. Through the haze, I saw the dark outline of a figure dressed all in black hood, sunglasses, and a mask. I couldn't breathe, and before I could even scream for help, the world went black, and I felt myself falling right into the water. When I finally came to, I was in a hospital room. I let out a low groan because my head felt like it was being pounded by a hammer. As I slowly blinked my eyes open, I realized I was squeezing someone's hand. I looked over to my right and saw a boy sitting by my bed, watching me with a worried expression. Then I saw those eyes. They were the exact same gray eyes from the ball. He spoke to me so tenderly, saying thank goodness I was awake. I shook my head a little, trying to clear the fog, and started to ask if he was the one from the party. He finished my sentence for me, laughing softly as he confirmed that he was indeed my dance partner. He introduced himself as Jeremiah and joked that he'd hoped our first real meeting would have been a bit more romantic than a hospital visit. Jeremiah told me that he'd always known we went to the same school, but he'd been intimidated by how famous and wealthy my family was, which is why he stuck to texting. He also told me something terrifying. The police had found a sleep-inducing drug inside that rose candy I ate. I wanted to ask him 1,000 more questions, but right then, my mom barged into the room with her secretaries and threw her arms around me. Once she saw I was okay, she turned to Jeremiah and told him she could never thank him enough for saving my life. She even invited him to have dinner with us the next night. He looked a bit hesitant, but he eventually nodded and agreed. The dinner at our house, however, was a total disaster. Mom wouldn't stop interrogating him like he was on trial, and Gregory was sitting there giving him these really menacing, creepy looks. I could tell Jeremiah was incredibly uncomfortable. At one point, Jeremiah asked where the restroom was, and Gregory jumped up, insisting on showing him the way. When Jeremiah finally came back to the table, he looked totally flustered and made an excuse to leave right away. I was so angry. I just knew Gregory had said something awful to him. I ran after him to the door to apologize, but he just smiled and told me not to worry. He even offered to pick me up for school the next morning, saying that since the culprit was still out there, he was going to be my personal guardian. It was so sweet I couldn't help but blush. After that, we started hanging out every single day. It sounds great on paper, right? But honestly, something felt off. It didn't feel like that deep, soulful connection we had when we were texting. Now, it just felt like we were two normal friends hanging out. And to make things even more annoying, his childhood friend Olivia was always around. She seriously couldn't leave him alone for more than 2 seconds, and it was starting to get on my nerves. One afternoon, Jeremiah and I went to the movies, hoping for some quiet time together. But of course, Olivia just happened to show up out of nowhere and sat herself right down next to him. It was miserable. I had to sit there watching them giggle and share popcorn while I felt like a total third wheel. I couldn't take it anymore, so I just got up and left. I found a random cab parked outside and hopped in, desperate to just go home. But my luck was terrible. The driver claimed he didn't know the way and said he didn't even have a phone for navigation. I had to hand him mine so he could use the GPS, but he snatched it out of my hand so rudely it took me by surprise. Then I started noticing how weird he looked. It was 9 o'clock at night, yet he was still wearing dark sunglasses and a face mask. My heart sank when I looked out the window and realized we had already driven past the town border. I started to tell him to stop, but suddenly the car filled with thick, sweet-smelling smoke. Just before I lost consciousness, the driver took off his glasses and turned around. I gasped because his eyes were exactly like Jeremiah's. I woke up around 10 that night in a dusty old bedroom filled with cobwebs. My head was spinning as I looked at the peeling wallpaper and realized I was trapped. I ran to the door and pulled on the handle with all my might, but it was locked tight. Just then, the door creaked open, and the driver walked in with a playful smile. He asked me if I recognized him, and then said he'd love to have another dance with me. My mind was racing. If he was talking about the dance, did that mean he was the real masked knight? It would explain why I didn't feel that spark with Jeremiah. But if this guy was the one I liked, why did Jeremiah lie? And why was I being held captive? Before I could wrap my head around it, I heard a car pull up outside. The guy hurried out to see who it was, and I knew I had to move. I tiptoed out of the room and crept downstairs as quietly as I could. When I reached the foyer, I saw the driver talking talking to someone. It was Jeremiah. I ducked behind a door and listened, my heart hammering against my rib. Jeremiah was pleading with him, calling him Cameron, and telling him that getting revenge on their father was one thing, but kidnapping me was going way too far. He told Cameron to take me home and end the madness, but Cameron argued back, saying he'd never actually hurt. He confessed that he was the one who jumped into the pool to save me, not Jeremiah. He said he just needed me as bait to expose what a monster Gregory really was, because apparently, Gregory didn't deserve to be their father. I nearly screamed and had to cover my mouth to stay quiet. Gregory was their father, and Cameron was my real savior? Everything I thought I knew was a lie. Cameron started talking about how Gregory had abandoned them and their mom when she was dying, stealing their business and their home. I was still reeling from the shock when another car pulled up. It was Gregory, and he wasn't alone. I quickly scrambled under the stairs as he walked in with a group of tough-looking bodyguards. Gregory looked at them so casually, commenting on how much his sons had grown up. Cameron didn't fall for the small talk. He told Gregory to cut to the chase and give back the business and everything he stole, or they wouldn't let me go. Gregory stood there for a few seconds, just staring at his own sons before he let out a cold, chilling smirk. He laughed and called them amateurs, even though he admitted they were smart like him. Then he said something that made my blood run cold. He told them that to him, I was nothing but an obstacle standing in the way of his inheritance. He actually told them to go ahead and take care of little Miss Annoying for him. Jeremiah sounded desperate when he asked Gregory if he was afraid they would expose everything he'd just admitted. But Gregory just laughed again. He said nobody would ever believe them because my mom was so mesmerized by him that she'd believe any lie he told. That total snake. I couldn't handle hearing him speak about my mom with such disrespect. My rage just boiled over, and before I could think, I jumped out from under the stair. I screamed right at his face, calling him a slimy, lying traitor and asking how he dared to talk about my mother like that. Gregory didn't even look guilty. He just casually signaled his guards to grab me and the boys, saying that the fun had to end there and telling us goodbye. The guards lunged toward us, and I was sure we were about to be tied up or worse, when suddenly the front door was smashed open. The police came pouring in, and right behind them was my mom. I was relieved when I saw her. She yelled for everyone to stop, her voice full of authority, and asked Gregory how he dared to touch her daughter. Gregory's face turned even paler than a goat. He started stuttering, calling her Jackie Honey, and trying to act like he had just arrived in time to save me. It was pathetic. Mom didn't buy it for a sec. She told him to cut the act because she had heard every single word he'd said. She told him he was going to jail for a long time, and I watched with so much satisfaction as the cops led him and his crooked guards away in handcuffs. I was so happy that I rushed over and threw my arms around her. It turns out Mom had been doing some investigating of her own after the pool incident. Her search led her straight to Cameron, and when she confronted him, he eventually broke down and told her the whole truth. That's how they came up with the plan to catch Gregory red-handed. Mom and the police had been waiting in ambush outside the whole time, just waiting for Gregory to show up and reveal his true self. A lot has happened in the 3 months since that crazy night. Mom finally finished all the messy legal paperwork, and she made sure that all the property Gregory had tricked her into merging with hers was signed back over to Cameron and Jeremiah. It felt good to see things go back to where they belong. I've also done a lot of thinking about my life. I realized that being wealthy isn't necessarily a bad thing. Having influence like this means I can actually help people who are less fortunate and make a real difference in the world. Nowadays, I spend my time helping Mom with her business and her charity work, and I'm actually really enjoying. I'm so proud of my hardworking, amazing mom, and for the first time in a long time, I'm proud of who I am too. And guess what? I finally have real friends who like me for me, not for my bank account. As for Jeremiah, he apologized for everything. He explained that he only lied about being the one at the party because he was terrified his brother might actually hurt me, and he wanted to stay close to protect me. We made up, of course, and we've become the best of friends. I wasn't so sure about his brother though. Cameron did everything he could to beg for my forgiveness, but after being kidnapped, I just couldn't bring myself to do it. Then one day, Jeremiah asked me to come by his house to visit his mother. She was so kind, and she pleaded with me not to think badly of her boys, especially Cameron. She looked me in the eyes and told me that he's actually in love with me. She said he talks about me all the time and constantly wishes that things could have happened differently. Hearing her say that really started to get to me. When I walked out the back door toward the river behind their house, I saw Cameron sitting there on the porch alone. He turned around and looked at me, and I felt my heart start to pound for my gray-eyed masked knight all over again. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my nerves, and walked over to join him just as the sun began to set over the water.